The illusion of love V's. The truth of solitude. Before we can truly understand love, we must first confront the silence we spend our lives avoiding. Picture yourself in a room with no distractions, no voices, no screens, no background noise. Just you and your thoughts. For some, this moment feels like peace, a long-awaited reunion with the self. But for many, it is suffocating. The silence is loud. The emptiness feels like pressure on the chest. And so we reach reflexively, impulsively for something, anything, to distract ourselves. A phone, a television, a conversation, even the comfort of another person. We've been conditioned to believe that solitude is a punishment, a sign of failure, of being unlovable or unwanted. Love, we are told, is the antidote. Find your other half. Find the one who completes you. This cultural script has been repeated in stories, films, songs, and fairy tales for centuries. But what if the script is flawed? What if the pursuit of love outside of ourselves is actually an avoidance of the deeper love that begins within? What if solitude is not the absence of love, but the very birthplace of it? This question may sound radical, even uncomfortable, but it is one that opens the door to a kind of love most people never encounter, not because it's rare, but because it requires stillness. It demands presence. It asks us to look inward before we reach outward. In the narratives we inherit, love is often dramatized. It is explosive, passionate, destiny. We're shown people who fall in love quickly and deeply, but rarely are we shown what it means to stand in love, not fall. And rarely are we asked to question what love is built upon. Is it clarity or confusion? Is it abundance or need? Most love stories in the media burn bright, then crash. They are intense but fragile. They collapse under the weight of unmet expectations and emotional dependency. Friedrich Nietzsche once observed that it's not a lack of love that destroys relationships, but a lack of friendship. But how can we offer friendship to another if we've never developed it with ourselves? That question is not rhetorical. It is the starting point. Because to understand love, real love, we must begin not with another, but with ourselves. And the only place we can meet ourselves honestly, without masks or distractions, is in solitude. Solitude is not loneliness. It is intimacy with the self. And that is where the foundation of love begins to form, not in the rush to find another, but in the quiet courage to sit with who we are when no one else is watching. 2. Dependency disguised as love. Most people don't enter relationships because they are overflowing with love. They enter because they are terrified of being alone. It's a quiet fear, often masked by romantic idealism or the longing for connection. We are taught to chase love as if it were oxygen, to believe that our wholeness depends on another's presence, affection, or approval. And so we look for someone not to walk beside us, but to fill the spaces within us we've never dared to explore. This is the most dangerous illusion in modern relationships, the belief that love will save us from ourselves. That someone out there holds the missing piece. But what we call love in these moments is not love. It is dependency, dressed in beautiful words and emotional highs. It feels like love because it gives temporary relief. But relief is not healing, and distraction is not intimacy. When we have not faced our own fears, our own pain, our own unresolved past, we don't bring presence into a relationship, we bring expectation. We don't offer love, we demand comfort. We don't build something, we try to be rescued. Carl Jung called this unconscious pattern a substitute for individuation, the essential process of becoming a whole and integrated self. Without this process, we do not connect, we cling. We do not love, we attach. And when that attachment is threatened, our illusion of love collapses. We spiral into jealousy, insecurity, control, and blame. The relationship, instead of being a sanctuary, becomes a battlefield of unmet needs and silent expectations. But what if we reverse this equation? What if we stopped entering relationships to be completed and instead chose to complete ourselves first? That is the promise of solitude. Not isolation, but preparation. Not rejection of love, but the foundation for it. In solitude, we meet the parts of ourselves we've outsourced to others. the parts we've asked someone else to soothe, affirm, or carry. We learn to befriend them, to integrate them, and as we do, our longing becomes less desperate. Our presence becomes deeper. We become someone who no longer reaches for love from emptiness, but from a place of fullness. And only then, when we are no longer afraid of standing alone, do we become truly capable of standing beside someone else, not because we need them, but because we freely choose to. 3. The paradox of connection. The greatest paradox of love is this: the more comfortable we are with being alone, the more capable we are of forming deep and authentic connections. It defies everything we've been taught. We're told that the goal of life is to find someone who completes us, someone who fills the silence, someone who makes us feel whole. But this story is backwards. True love does not emerge from longing, it emerges from presence. And presence is born in solitude. The person who fears being alone will never truly love, because they will always love from need. They will grasp instead of give. They will demand instead of understand. They will confuse possession with intimacy and mistake validation for connection. And yet we celebrate this pattern. We call it romantic when someone can't live without another. We call it passion when they obsess, when they cling. But what we're really seeing is fear of emptiness, fear of self, fear of facing life without a buffer. That fear, when brought into a relationship, creates chaos. It demands constant reassurance. It punishes any sign of distance. It makes love brittle, fragile, and conditional. But solitude changes everything. Solitude is not a space of absence. It is a space of expansion. It is where we learn to sit with our own thoughts, to feel our own emotions, to hold our own discomfort without needing someone else to carry it for us. And as we do, something remarkable happens. We become free. Free from the compulsion to be chosen, to be seen, to be completed. And from that freedom, we can finally choose love, not as escape, but as expression. When we stop needing someone to complete us, we stop fearing their absence. We stop controlling, manipulating, or shrinking ourselves to keep them close. Instead, we offer love as a gift, not a transaction. We show up with openness, not desperation. The irony is that the less we need someone, the more capable we are of truly loving them. Because now love is no longer about survival. It is about truth. It is no longer about erasing solitude. It is about honoring it in each other. And from that mutual honoring, the deepest form of connection can finally begin. 4. Shadow work and self-confrontation. There is a reason why solitude feels unbearable to so many. It is not the stillness that frightens us. It is what the stillness reveals. In the absence of noise, we are left with the unfiltered truth of our own minds. The thoughts we've suppressed, the feelings we've avoided, the parts of ourselves we've denied, they all rise to the surface. And suddenly, the silence becomes deafening. This is why so many run from solitude. It is not the external quiet they fear, but the internal noise. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the hidden aspects of the psyche that we refuse to acknowledge. Our envy, our rage, our fear, our shame. These are not flaws to be eliminated, but truths to be integrated. And yet, most people avoid this integration. They enter relationships hoping that another will fix what they themselves cannot face. They look to their partners to soothe their insecurities, to erase their past, to hold their unhealed wounds. But what begins in avoidance cannot end in peace. When we project our shadow onto our partners, we create a cycle of blame and disappointment. We expect them to be the source of our happiness, and when they fail, as they inevitably will, we resent them. We call it love, but it's a battlefield of unmet needs and unresolved pain. Solitude is the only place where this pattern can be broken. Because only in solitude are we forced to sit with our shadow without distraction. Only there can we witness our inner landscape honestly. This confrontation is not easy. It takes courage to face the parts of ourselves we've spent years hiding from. But within that courage lies transformation. When we stop outsourcing our healing, we begin to take responsibility for our inner world. We stop asking others to carry our emotional weight. And as we do, we become lighter, clearer, more stable. This is the essence of emotional maturity, not the suppression of emotion, but the willingness to meet it fully. From this place, love becomes something different. It is no longer a desperate plea to be saved. It is an offering from someone who has done the work, someone who has faced their darkness and chosen light. And when two people meet from this place, not from shadow, but from clarity, they do not entangle. They evolve. 5. Emotional resilience from solitude. When we embrace solitude instead of fearing it, we stop looking outward for stability. We stop depending on the presence or affection of another to feel whole. And in its place, a new kind of strength begins to grow: emotional resilience. This is not the hardening of the heart or the rejection of connection. It is the capacity to feel deeply without being consumed, to love fully without losing ourselves, to remain centered even when everything around us shifts. Most relationships fall apart not because love is absent, but because one or both people are emotionally unstable. Their sense of self is fragile. Their worth is contingent on approval. Their moods are dictated by validation. In this space, love becomes volatile. Every disagreement feels like abandonment. Every silence feels like rejection. Every flaw in the other becomes a threat. But when we have cultivated emotional resilience through solitude, we bring something else into our relationship's stability. Not the kind that avoids conflict or pretends everything is fine, but the kind that knows how to navigate challenge without collapse. We stop seeing love as something we need to get and start seeing it as something we are ready to give, without expectation, without fear. And paradoxically, it is this kind of love, offered freely, not demanded, that creates the deepest bonds. The relationships that last are not built on desperate need. They are built on conscious choice, on the meeting of two people who have already done the inner work and no longer seek to be completed. Instead, they stand whole and choose each other not because they must, but because they can. This is the quiet power of solitude. It doesn't just prepare us for love, it transforms the way we love. It makes us less reactive and more reflective. It gives us the space to understand our emotional triggers, to soothe our own wounds, to rewrite the stories we've inherited about love and connection. And in doing so, it frees the people we love from the impossible task of fixing us. When love is no longer burdened by our unresolved pain, it becomes light. It becomes safe. It becomes something that lifts rather than weighs down. And that is the foundation of a love that endures, not passion, not perfection, but emotional strength born in solitude. 6. Love as an expansion, not an escape. There is a fundamental misunderstanding at the root of most romantic suffering: the idea that love is meant to rescue us, that it should lift us out of our pain, distract us from our inner chaos, or deliver us from the burden of solitude. And while love can bring beauty, warmth, and comfort, it was never meant to be an escape. In truth, love is meant to expand us, not to fix what is broken, but to illuminate what is already whole. Yet too often, we chase relationships as a form of avoidance. We enter them looking for relief from our own unresolved inner world. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer recognized this pattern. He argued that many romantic relationships are not fueled by genuine connection, but by the unconscious desire to escape ourselves. We seek others not because we see them clearly, but because we hope they will distract us from what we are unwilling to confront. But love built on escape is always unstable, because eventually the distraction fades. The novelty wears off. And what remains is not clarity, but confusion, two people entangled in each other's unprocessed fears. Solitude offers us a radical alternative. It invites us to pause, to turn inward, and to meet the parts of ourselves we've been running from. It teaches us to sit with discomfort rather than flee from it. And slowly, that discomfort becomes familiarity. Familiarity becomes understanding. Understanding becomes peace. And from that peace, we no longer need someone to rescue us. We are no longer looking for love as a way out. Instead, we are looking for love as a way forward, a way to grow, to deepen, to share, not to avoid, escape, or numb. This shift is transformative. It allows us to choose relationships that reflect our truth rather than our fears. We begin to see love not as something we fall into, but as something we rise into. Something that demands not desperation, but discernment. And this is when love becomes expansive. When it stops being a hiding place and starts being a mirror. When it challenges us to become more, not for someone else, but alongside them. So the question is not whether love can heal us. The question is whether we've done the healing solitude requires so that love, when it comes, doesn't have to do the work we were always meant to do for ourselves. 7. The spiritual foundations of self-love. Long before psychology gave language to the self, spiritual traditions understood that the journey inward is not a detour, it is the path. In Buddhism, the search for enlightenment begins not in the external world, but in the quiet observation of the self. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering, and love, in its purest form, is not the clinging to another, but the ability to see them clearly without need, without distortion. But how can we see another clearly if we have never truly seen ourselves? How can we love from presence if we've only ever loved from fear? These are not abstract questions. They are the foundation of every relationship that has ever failed or flourished. Most people seek love to escape discomfort. They chase connection to silence the unease they feel when alone. But true spiritual teachings ask something different. They ask us to stop chasing, to stop grasping, to become still. Because in that stillness, we begin to remember something essential, that love is not something we find. It is something we become. When we sit in solitude, we are not withdrawing from love. We are preparing for it. We are learning to listen to the breath, to the body, to the patterns of thought we've mistaken for truth. We are becoming aware of the parts of ourselves we've rejected. And as we make peace with them, we soften. We become less reactive, less needy, more compassionate. And this compassion, rooted in self-awareness, becomes the ground upon which real love can grow. Without it, we are simply reenacting old stories, projecting unhealed wounds onto the people we claim to love. But with it, we begin to relate from truth. We see the other not as a solution, but as a soul. Not as someone who must meet our expectations, but as someone we are willing to meet as they are. Spiritual love is not about possession. It is not about merging into one indistinct whole. It is about recognizing the divine in yourself, and then choosing to honor that same divinity in another. When two people meet from this place where love is not a transaction, but a reflection, then and only then can love become a path to awakening, not escape. 8. Reframing solitude in a distracted world. In a world designed to keep us distracted, solitude has become almost revolutionary. Every moment is filled by notifications, by entertainment, by endless scrolling that numbs rather than nourishes. We are constantly connected, and yet profoundly disconnected from others, from meaning, and most of all, from ourselves. The idea of choosing to be alone, of voluntarily sitting in stillness, seems strange, even suspicious. But this suspicion reveals more about our conditioning than it does about solitude itself. We've been taught that productivity is value, that silence is laziness, that discomfort must be escaped at all costs. And yet, all growth begins in discomfort. The psychologist Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the Holocaust and one of the most powerful voices in existential psychology, wrote that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our power to choose. Our freedom. Our growth. Solitude expands this space. It slows us down. It interrupts the automatic habits that keep us locked in cycles of reactivity. It gives us time to feel our feelings before we act on them, to question our beliefs before we enforce them, to examine the stories we tell ourselves about love, worthiness, and connection. Without this space, we react instead of reflect. We repeat instead of evolve. We enter relationships blindly, carrying with us unexamined wounds and unconscious fears. But when we reclaim solitude, when we stop fearing it and start honoring it, we reclaim the most essential part of ourselves, our agency. Solitude is not the enemy of connection. It is the foundation of conscious choice. It is what allows us to pause before speaking, to breathe before reacting, to consider what we are bringing into a relationship and why. In this way, solitude is not passive. It is fiercely active. It is where we build the strength to choose love without losing ourselves in it. It is where we learn to sit in the fire of our own emotions and discover that we do not burn. In a world that tells us to constantly look outward, solitude calls us home. And from that home, from that grounded inner space, we can begin to love not from chaos, not from confusion, but from clarity. 9. From healing to boundaries. Solitude does more than help us heal. It teaches us how to protect what we've healed. When we've spent time alone, not in bitterness or withdrawal, but in honest reflection and integration, we begin to develop something essential: boundaries. Not walls, not avoidance, but the quiet confidence to say, this is who I am, and this is what I will allow into my life. Without solitude, boundaries feel threatening. We fear being alone, so we tolerate behaviors that undermine us. We accept relationships that drain us because the silence seems more unbearable than the pain. But with solitude, we begin to see our own worth. We begin to understand that being alone is not the worst thing that can happen. Being with the wrong person and losing ourselves in the process is. Solitude brings clarity. It helps us see which relationships nourish us and which ones diminish us. It teaches us to listen to the body, to the inner knowing that whispers when something doesn't feel right. And most importantly, it teaches us that we are allowed to choose. Philosopher Alain de Botton observed that modern love often suffers because people enter relationships expecting to be healed. But healing is an internal process. No one can do that work for us. And when we ask someone else to fix what we have not yet faced, we set the relationship up to fail. Love cannot thrive where there is no self-awareness. It cannot blossom where one or both people are still looking for a savior. Real love, the kind that endures, is not a rescue mission. It is a partnership between two people who are both committed to their own growth. And that growth includes saying no, saying not yet, saying I love you, but I will not abandon myself to keep you. Boundaries are the shape of self-respect. They are not a rejection of connection. They are the conditions that make connection sustainable. Solitude is where we learn this. It's where we begin to trust ourselves enough to walk away from what is misaligned, not because we are afraid, but because we are finally free. Free to choose love that aligns with our truth, not love that compensates for our wounds. And that choice, made from the strength of solitude, is the beginning of everything sacred. 10. Love that evolves the self. After all the seeking, all the silence, and all the stillness, we arrive at the final question, the one that changes everything. What is the true purpose of love? Most people never ask this. They assume love is meant to bring happiness, companionship, security. And while love can offer all of these, its deeper purpose is far more radical. Love exists to evolve us. It is not just a feeling or a state of being, it is a force. A mirror. A catalyst. It doesn't just comfort, it awakens. It doesn't just hold, it challenges. But here's the truth most never realize. This evolution does not begin in the relationship. It begins before. It begins in solitude. Solitude is the training ground. The inner dojo where we confront our patterns, our shadows, our stories. It is where we build the emotional strength, the patience, the clarity that love will inevitably ask of us. Without solitude, love becomes chaotic. It becomes burdened with expectations, distorted by insecurity, and defined by need. But when we have done the work that solitude requires, love changes form. It no longer arrives to complete us. It arrives to reflect us. And in that reflection, we grow not in spite of the other, but because we have finally become whole enough to stand beside them without losing ourselves. Khalil Gibran once wrote, "Let there be spaces in your togetherness. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls." This is love evolved. Love that honors space. Love that allows for difference. Love that does not seek to possess, but to witness. And so, if you are single, let solitude be your sanctuary, not your shame. Use this time to become the kind of presence you would want to share. If you are in a relationship, ask, are you truly loving, or are you simply attached? Are you growing together, or avoiding yourselves through each other? Because when love is built on fear of solitude, it breaks. But when it is built on two whole individuals who have embraced their solitude, it becomes something unbreakable, something sacred. And in that sacred space, love no longer becomes something you chase. It becomes something you are. And that is the love the world has been waiting for.